Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin is upon us. We're, what, 3 nights from the fight? I'm super excited. I'm through the roof. Can barely contain myself. I'm ready for fight night. Um, what's interesting about this fight is Canelo's coming into this fight on a 3-fight wave of basically taking easy touches. He took the long scenic route to get to this fight. Gennady Golovkin comes into this fight coming off of a tough fight with Daniel Jacobs, a fight that I felt he won, he earned, he deserved, and it was a tough fight against a tough opponent, a physical, technical, and fast, big middleweight. Jacobs is a big middleweight, and he showed that he outweighed Golovkin, what, 10, 15 pounds on fight night. Just an impressive specimen and a guy who I feel is undervalued in boxing, in the boxing world, as he proved. Danny Jacobs, I think he overwhelmingly proved by now, especially with the Golovkin fight, that the Dimitri Pirog knockout loss was an outlier. I think he just had a bad night that night. He's come back with a vengeance. But not to get off topic, both of these fighters come into this fight on a different trajectory. And that's the perception anyway. And I think this is a teachable moment in saying that, because boxing fans, at the end of the day, we get what we deserve. And I think we're treated by promoters and by fighters the way we're treated because of how we perceive things. And like I said, we get what we deserve. Let me give you an example. This is a specific example here. Canelo Alvarez comes off of 3 easy fights. It is what it is. I mean, if you're an Amir Khan fan, a Liam Smith fan, a Chavez Jr. fan, I'm sorry. It is what it is. Amir Khan he just had a horrible chin at 147. So to think he would come in at 155 against a guy who's very big and be able to take those punches, it just wasn't realistic. So that was an easy setup fight for Canelo. Liam Smith was supposed to be an easy setup fight, and Liam Smith actually had his moments in that fight. But Chavez Jr., same thing. It was a guy that was going to be there for Canelo to hit, excuse me. So 3 easy fights to set up, or on paper should have been easy fights for Canelo to set up this Golovkin fight. He took the scenic route. So the perception in the boxing world and how everybody's building this up in the boxing world, and it may be true. It may be true that Canelo is vastly improved. He's vastly improved. He's coming into his prime. He's such an improved fighter. He looks so great right now. But look at his opposition. Now look at Gennady Golovkin. He comes off of the fight with Danny Jacobs, gets a tough, well-earned victory against Danny Jacobs. But he goes 12 rounds for the first time in, what, 19 fights, 18 fights, whatever it was. People saw a different side of Golovkin. He had to dig deep to win the fight. And all of a sudden, he's exposed. All of a sudden, his trajectory is going down. So Canelo's stock is rising, coming off these 3 fights that were set up for him to look great. Gennady Golovkin takes a risk by fighting Jacobs when the Canelo fight is looming, and shows some vulnerability, so to speak, or has to dig deep to win a fight by decision, and his trajectory, his stock is going down. So it's a teachable moment on how fans perceive things, how finicky fans are, and why, at the end of the day, a lot of fighters choose to go the low-risk, high-reward route. Why you get so many bad matchups and bad fights in boxing, because promoters see this. Promoters see how fighters react to Chocolatito losing a fight. And all of a sudden, Chocolatito loses a fight, and all of a sudden he's a bum, and he's washed up, and he was never that good, blah, blah, blah. And Golovkin has a tough fight, and he's exposed. And these other fighters who are taking easy fights and easy fights and easy fights and staying undefeated are the greatest thing since sliced bread. But that being said, it may be true that Canelo has gotten better. No, I would venture to say he is. But it's tough it's tough to tell off of the recent fights. Now, my main point I wanted to get to is, will these easy touches have a negative effect on Canelo coming into this fight? And I'm a betting guy. I like to gamble, especially on college football. I'm a college football bettor. I love college football. So I'm always looking at trends every day during the week. I'm looking at trends, weather patterns for what the game is. It in a dome? Is it in a, is it going to be outside? This and that. Looking at everything. So I look at trends, and I bet in boxing every once in a while too. So I'm steadily looking at trends. So there is a trend here with, to me, Canelo. His career is like waves. He'll have this wave of fights, 2 or 3 fights in a row where they're easy touches, and then he'll have 2 or 3 fights in a row where they're tough fights, and then back up and back down. But there is a similar trend that he had a couple of years ago where he fought, who was it? He had a bunch of easy fights where he was weight bullying guys, fighting guys like Matthew Hatton, Indu, fought a washed up Shane Mosley. So he had a bunch of easy touches, and then he took a tough fight with Austin Trout. And in my opinion, he looked very good that night. I remember being impressed with Canelo that night, being that up to that point, Canelo was a volume puncher, was a guy who put combinations together well, and it was seen going into that fight that Austin Trout will be able to counter Canelo. That's what a lot of people were saying. Austin Trout will be able to counter Canelo, being that Canelo liked to stay in the pocket and throw a lot of combination punches. Canelo wasn't seen as a counter puncher then. So in that way, that's an example of how he's improved. And in that fight, he was very patient. And I remember seeing Trout looking confused, like, why is this guy not attacking? Why is this guy not attacking? Because Austin Trout expected a completely different Canelo, as most of the boxing public did. They expected a more offensive-minded Canelo, and Canelo went in there with a very smart tactic of confusing Trout, and he went in there to beat Trout at his own game. He was countering Trout. He was laying back. He was picking his spots. And even in that fight, which is one of his Achilles heel, I think, even to this day. And when I do my prediction video, that's one thing I'll bring up is Trout still, I think that's the reason he did it. He still faded a little late in that fight. Still showed some vulnerabilities late in that fight as far as stamina goes. And I think those issues may still be there. But he still fought a smart fight. And then he came back in the next fight and fought Mayweather Jr. I don't take that into account because Mayweather is an outlier, in my opinion. He's a guy who, you lost to Mayweather, no big deal. Mayweather's Mayweather. Just Mayweather's Mayweather. No, enough said. He's an alien. So I don't take that into account. But then he fights Angulo, an easier touch, and then beats Lara, a tougher touch. Fights Kirkland, an easier touch, and then and beats him, and then fights a tough Cotto and beats him. So there's these waves of up and down, up and down. So I guess what I'm getting at is I don't think, I've heard people say it, I've heard the theory that these light touches may have a negative effect on Canelo coming into this fight because he might be a little rusty against top opposition. I don't think that's going to be the case because I've seen in the past where Canelo has fought lighter touches and then comes back and then rises to the occasion against tougher opponents. And I think he's going to do it again here where he fights a good fight. Now, whether that's enough to beat Golovkin, we'll see. We'll see. And hopefully I'll have a prediction video for you in the next day or two. But I think he'll be okay in that aspect of it. Now, another thing to throw into the equation here is Canelo's never fought at the full 160 limit. And it's just shows you where we're at in boxing today, to where you can have the lineal middleweight champion who has never fought at the middleweight limit, the full middleweight limit. No, he's fought between 154 and 160, which at catch weights, which is officially a middleweight fight. But he's never fought at the middleweight limit, the official middleweight limit of 160. So this will be his first time doing it. So what I'm getting at is, will that have an effect? Because although Canelo is going to be the bigger guy in this fight, he'll outweigh Golovkin in this fight. and they're very much their frames, although not similar. They both hold the middleweight frame very well. But Canelo has never fought. I don't know. I don't want to say he's never fought a true middleweight guy. I mean, Chavez Jr., a bigger guy. Um, Cotto, although he's not a true middleweight, he's fought at middleweight, but he's never fought a guy who a very good middleweight. Like he's going to fight with, well, I guess you call Cotto a very good middleweight, but Golovkin's a great middleweight. So he's never fought a guy at the full middleweight limit who is a very good or great middleweight. He fought Cotto, remember, at what was it, 155? So, and I think that had to do with Cotto as well. I don't know why Cotto requested a catchweight too, but it is what it is. Probably because Canelo's the bigger, naturally bigger guy. But will that have an effect? Because what I'm getting at is Canelo has never hit, when he hits guys, it has an effect, but he's never fought a guy in Golovkin has a very good chin, a very good chin, right? And he's a full middleweight. So I guess what I'm getting at is, will Canelo's power have an effect in this fight with Golovkin? It somewhat had an effect against Cotto. Chavez Jr. didn't want to open up. So those are two decent sized guys. Chavez Jr., a very big guy who didn't want to open up against Canelo. But Golovkin, a different beast. So will that have an effect, not fighting at 160, the full 160 before this? I think that's a little overblown too. I think he'll be fine. And if anything, I think the fighting at 160, a full 160, will actually be an advantage for Canelo because Canelo is a guy who doesn't like cutting weight. You've seen in the past he has trouble cutting weight late. Doesn't like it. He's on record as saying he doesn't like cutting weight. No fighter does, but when you're trying to get that down that much, Canelo's a true middleweight at this point. And I think being at 160, having those extra couple pounds to not have to cut late in the training camp, I think it's only going to serve him. And he looks good. I saw him at the open workout this week in Vegas, the outside open workout, and he looked good. He looked fresh. His body looked good. So I think this weight will actually serve him better. So Canelo versus Golovkin. Let me know what y'all think about this video. And do you think these things will have an effect on Canelo? I don't think they will. I think all this is overblown. I think both fighters are coming in with a good frame of mind. And we're going to get the best out of both these guys. Biggest fight for Triple G, although he might not be in his prime. It is his biggest fight. And I think he's going to come out with his A game. And Canelo's going to come out with his A game too. And I think that's why I'm so much looking forward to this fight, is all the stars are aligning. Everything's lining up for this to be a classic fight. Hopefully we get it. So hit me up. Let me know what y'all think about all this. Peace.